All right. So in this video, I want to do a bit of an overview on Node.js and Express. Um, just talk about it and see like what are some of the features about it. Um, I have some slides. I'm not going to share these slides because they're not done yet, and I don't know where to end it. So I'm not um, in perfect peace with these slides because I want to give you something that I'm at least like okay with. So anyway, let's talk about this. So one thing that is true about the relationship between humans and technology is that humans will almost always choose working smarter over working harder. So much of the work that developers do is common across the board, even if the desired outcome is different. The process to reaching these outcomes has many of the same features. Chef's kiss on the wording of that. What this means is that fortunately, there's less actual code that we have to write to do some powerful things because it's already been written, proofread, packaged, and is always being maintained for us. Hello. Thank you, Node. Node.js is a cross platform, open source JavaScript runtime environment that can run on various operating systems. That's I got that directly from their website. The code is executed outside of the web browser. This means that developers can use JavaScript to interact with servers. Okay, and that's kind of what we're going to be doing. We'll be building out servers so that we can um, connect to them and talk to them. Node was initially developed by Ryan Dahl in 2009 in response to Apache HTTP servers' inability to handle large volumes of concurrent connections. Built on Google Chrome, Node has expanded immensely over the past 15 years to be able to do much of the heavy lifting for us in a scalable fashion. So, um, before Node, JavaScript was, I would say, almost exclusively, if not exclusively, a front end language. Um, and that's what made it powerful and very attractive because you could build websites and use JavaScript to leverage the functionality of it. And so, since everybody's been on the web, since the mid to late 90s, JavaScript was a very popular language to use because you can build for the web. But with its front end capabilities, it struggled on dealing with back end technology. And so, what that meant was for developers, if you want to be able to cover the full stack, you would absolutely have to learn another language, whether it's PHP or some other language, primarily PHP at the time. And so, what Node does, it enables us to be able to perform front end work, also perform back end work with only having to know one language, and that's JavaScript. So, that's the cool thing about it. What is this runtime we talking about? Runtime essentially refers to the life cycle of a block of code. It involves not only the software that is being executed, but also the hardware that it is run on. Data exists somewhere, whether a traditional physical server at a data center or in the cloud. A developer writes the code that talks to the server by making a request. The request is then authenticated to make sure that the client has permission to receive the data, to retrieve the data, excuse me, and lastly, a response is made. So when we talk about runtime, we're talking about the code or the execution of connecting to the server making a request on the server, say, hey, server, I need this data. And then that request being authenticated, saying, hey, yes, you have permission to access this, and then sending it back to the client with a response. That's what we're talking about when you hear runtime. We're referring to that transaction, okay? And that transaction is represented by two governing objects, if you will, a request and a response. Node.js has several tools available fresh out of the box that developers can use rather than having to write the code from scratch. One of the many tools that we will look at in this unit is Express. Express is a web application framework that comes with a large set of features for web and mobile application development. So there's a lot of things that are inside of Node. When you install Node to your computer, I mean, you've opened it up to access to tons of different tools that you can use for so many different things. What we'll focus on primarily in this portion is Express. Now we're going to install some other things, okay, that's going to help us out with our projects. But the focus of this is going to be on Express because that is what we'll be using uh, to essentially build out the APIs and figure out how to route and navigate through different excuse me, how to navigate through our server. So some of the features that Express has, and these are the highlights of Express and why Express is so useful. One, it's minimal. Two, it's flexible. Three, it is a web application framework, or it has a web application framework. Uh, Four, it's very fast. And lastly, it's opinionated. Okay. So what do we mean by all of that? Express is minimal, less is more. Okay. So the philosophy is to provide the minimal layer between your brain and the server, and it provides a minimal framework, and you can add different parts of functionality as needed. So with that, you don't need a whole lot of code or to write a whole lot of code for Express to work. It can handle that transaction that we're talking about, that runtime. It can handle that with very minimal code. So that keeps us from having to write, extensive amounts and blocks, like all this heavy lifting and doing all this parsing and picking at all these different places. No, Express handles that for us. Very minimal, with very minimal code. Flexible. You can see here it accepts hypertext transfer protocol requests from a client and returns an HTTP response. What we mean by HTTP request is primarily the GET request, the POST request, PUT, and PATCH. There's also delete, but we're referring to those particular requests. It accepts those which was already uh, in the lexicon for web development, and it built everything off of that. So it's very flexible. Um, so by being able to handle those HTTP protocol requests, it can do pretty much everything that we need to for the web. You see here that Express is a web app framework. It is on the server side of a web application. So if you've done any front end development previously, HTML, CSS, and some JavaScript, what you're doing is you're working on the client side. So basically, how does a website look? How does it function? What is it that, myself, a user, what do I see when I go to your website? That is the front end part of a web application. Express is the back end, the server side. So it allows apps to share data and integrate with other services. Generally done through a web application programming interface, which is called an API, or the server side component. Okay. So what we're able to do is all of the back end stuff through Express. And I mentioned before previously, you had to know a completely different language. You maybe had to learn PHP uh, or Java to do back end development. Well, now you can do it all with JavaScript, and you can do that through Express. I mean, its name is Express. It's very fast. So the cool thing about Express in particular um, is, again, it's very fast. We talked about Node being built in 2009, and the reason why it was built is so that um, it could handle large scales and move very quickly. So the time in between uh, connecting to a database and returning the response to the client is very fast using Express. Unopinionated. You can use any other Node packages uh, without having to disrupt the performance of either one. So you can add any kind of Node package that you want to on top of Express, or Express on top of another Node package, and nothing nothing's going to get corrupted or disrupted. So that's Node and Express. My very quick presentation of that. If you haven't already, you should go to Node's website and download the long-term support version. You can see at the time that these slides were created, it was 20.11.0, but now it's 22.20. So it's still going to work just fine. But get the long-term support version of Node, and then you can check after you've installed it and everything. You just type Node-V in the command line from your Git Bash terminal, and up there with this video. Okay, give you a little overview, and then after that, we're going to build our very first Node-based application. Okay, so uh, make sure that if you haven't installed Node yet, make sure that you do that. Okay, make sure you have the most recent long-term support version of it, which again, right now at the time I'm doing this video is 22.20. And then I'm going to go over here and make our first node-based application so we can see how we do that on the other side of this video.